So let's start about talking about why are we even talking about performance, right? So this is like a recent study conducted by Forrester for Akamai. Akamai is one of the leading content delivery networks, right, on how performance affects shopping behavior. If you look at it closely, right, as I was staring at this closely, a few things came out very, very evident. Number one is, right, benchmarks for acceptable performance, right, has really shifted. Like, wait, 4 or 5 years back, when a website, renders a page in 4 to 5 seconds, it was considered acceptable performance, right? Now that number has shifted to, 2 seconds. Your consumer expectations have shifted like to, to 2 seconds. The second thing that hits me is like this market is extremely competitive, right? Even a slight differentiation in performance can cause a big impact in revenues. And finally, it's just not just revenues, right? The impact is also on brand perception, your customer loyalty, goodwill, and if your site is down, you get even negative press, right? So a lot of things are riding, on performance, and it's not uncommon for sites to even sacrifice on functionality for the sake of performance, right? So you look at this particular graph, it says 79% of shoppers who are dissatisfied with the website are less likely to buy from the same site again. Now, if you couple this with the fact that this is such a competitive market, you would really lose out a lot of money if you don't build a site which can scale up and scale well with high performance. So net, right? Performance is extremely critical, for the success of any e-commerce website. So now that we understand why site performance, why is it critical, what are implications, right? Let us spend a minute in understanding what does an e-commerce solution really entail, right? What does like a landscape look like? So look at this landscape, right? This is like a typical system context diagram for a stored application. When it's a the central piece that you see store site is actually a consumer-facing e-commerce site. Like, look at the number of integration points, that the site integrates with, right? Either asynchronously or synchronously through various integration patterns, protocols. It doesn't matter if you built your site using Websphere Commerce or ATG or, hybrid, right? But one thing that is clear is, though the store site is just your core piece of your ecosystem, it integrates with so many other systems, right? External systems, like things like business tools for content refresh. You have CMS because the content needs to refresh every day. Your order is captured, it needs to be fulfilled, so you have an order management system. You have a lot of SaaS providers these days. You have payment plugins, you have SEO, you have analytics. The list really goes on, right? So performance tuning in an e-commerce context is a massive undertaking, and it is just not restricted to your stores alone. To give you an example, right, if you look at any of these enterprise web services, if they go down and if you do not have right connection timeout or read timeout set, they can hold your website at ransom and pretty much bring your cluster down, right? So you need to test every integration pattern, tune their configurations so that you isolate your store site from any fluctuations in their performance, right? So in net, right, we are talking about a massive undertaking. To give you an example, right, in one of the solutions that I work on, we are like a 20-member team, trying to tune performance of a retail site for almost 1.5 years now, and we are not there completely yet, right? So in the interest of time, right, so this is a massive topic, and you can talk about days about performance in e-commerce, but I'm going to restrict myself to a 101, which will give you a good jump start on what are the key levers that you look at, right? So now that we looked at the landscape, let's look at how do you approach performance tuning. So let's say you get into a project and you're handed over the responsibility to start to manage or to run or drive the performance tuning, right? How do you approach it, even for the store site, right? So you look at a typical browser request, right? if you go to Amazon.com or, Target.com or any of these websites, a typical browser request travels through multiple network hops, right? You try www.xyz.com, it is typically intercepted by a CDN or a content delivery network like Akamai. From there, it goes to a load balancer. You have multiple traffic managers, and then it comes to the web server, and then it goes to the JVM node, and then it goes to the database or any third-party services, right? So each tier here will require focused performance tuning, and the focused performance tuning is not a one-time activity. It needs to be done iteratively. It needs to be, for each of these configurations in these tier, right? No one size fits all, right? Every site is unique in its own way, and these configurations, etc., will need to be arrived only by, repeated performance tests. So, net, right? Tuning is a very iterative process, right? When you talk about tuning like thread count or connection pool, timeout configurations, these are all established after repetitive tests. The second is, if you look at this, one thing will be evident, right? It's not just the code or the design that requires tuning. There are several factors beyond your code that can impact performance, right? To give you one example, right? A simple disk I/O read change in your storage layer can just cause a massive improvement in your site-wide performance, right? On the flip side, if you mess up the I/O read, and your performance can pretty much be killed across the site. So it's both ways, right? Every layer you see here, load balancer, web server, JVM, databases, front-end browser, every layer will require performance tuning and is sensitive, right? So with this background, right, let's now switch focus to WCS, or Websphere Commerce Server. So far, we spent a quick few minutes understanding why is performance important, what are the implications, and we also talked about how do we approach performance in a tiered fashion, right? How do we approach tuning in a tiered fashion? Now, before we start talking about the various tiers of Websphere Commerce and the tuning levers, right, let's spend a few minutes understanding the application architecture of Websphere Commerce. So Websphere Commerce is a very popular e-commerce package, right? A lot of e-commerce sites are built on that, like ATG. At the end of the day, it's just ultimately another Java application or a J2E application running on the Websphere application container, right? Commerce offers a lot of out-of-the-box features, and every store that implements Websphere will also have to do a lot of customization to meet its specific requirements, right? So for example, right, to support this customization, Websphere is also very layered. So when a request comes into your application server running Websphere Commerce Server, it goes through a servlet filter chain, and from there it is sent to the presentation layer, which is a Struts-driven MVC framework. Then the controller command, there's a controller command for the action that you requested. That opens up a transactional context. It opens one or more task commands, which are smaller units of command, and then each task command will access the database to access beans and entity beans. It's a very layered architecture, right? So every layer needs to be understood very well before we start, looking at tuning, right? So if I look at the tiers, or what are the performance sensitive tiers that affect your performance. So you have front-end optimizations, right? This is like your browser. This actually has nothing to do with Websphere Commerce, right? Doesn't matter whether you are running a J2E or .NET application. This is common for everyone. Then we have web server tuning. Then we have Dynacache. How do you size? How do you tune it? And then we have JVM tuning, and then you have the WAF, or the Websphere Application Server tuning. And then finally, we have the Websphere Framework tuning and the database tier tuning. So the next, 20 minutes, right, I'm going to talk about each of these, tiers one by one. A key thing to notice, right, this will just be a 101, right? Each of these tiers can be actually talked about it for days together, and you can write even a book on it. So this is intended just to get you a good jump start. So let's keep moving and talk about the first tier, front-end optimizations. So in one of the reports that I was reviewing, I read that if your page response is, say, 3 seconds,